You know, you're talking about the core mission of the military, and you're right. It's not. I remember a few decades ago there was a bad snowstorm in Toronto, and at the time the mayor Mel Lastman wanted the military to come shovel. You know, every single
I was
person.
in the Army during that period. I served from 72 to 99. And a very good friend of mine that I'd served in Egypt with back in 1978 was the commander of Land Forces Western Area. And he phoned me. I was in Borden, Ontario, and he was a joke, but he called me up. He was a general, and he called me up and he says, Dave, you haven't happened to see a battalion driving down the road past you? I seem to have lost my immediate rapid reaction force. I'm told they're on their way to shovel snow in Toronto. The two of us laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was absolutely ridiculous. I was also there for the ice storm. I closed my complete training establishment and deployed 300 soldiers to help restore power in both Ontario and Quebec. Now, don't get me wrong. Canadian soldiers are extremely proud when they can be used as the force of last resort to help in emergency management tasks in our country. But every minute of every day that they are away from their training and deployment missions to fight for our country is a day that their skills diminish. And so we should only use them as the force of last resort. And what we're seeing in this last 9-year period is the armed forces being called routinely by premiers of provinces, by mayors of towns to deploy because they have failed to invest properly
That's
in their own
exactly right.
emergency management.
That's exactly it. And they have failed to prepare. And it's like, oh, we'll call the Army. They'll do anything.
Correct.
You know, and I think of one of the, and by the way, you know, I remember growing up, people used to say, well, Canada, we're two things. We're the best healthcare in the world. No one says that anymore. And we're the peacekeepers. I don't know if we have any peacekeepers deployed anywhere. I know there's a little force of Canadians in the Baltics, but they're not peacekeepers. They're sort of with, I think, in Latvia or Estonia. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, I mean, David, is it true that we don't actually have any Canadians on a UN peacekeeping mission anywhere in the world? Is that accurate to say?
To the best of my knowledge, we have individuals deployed in UN missions, but we don't have formed units of any type. And maybe I need to be a little more clear on the UN peacekeeping. I served 72 to 99, and so I did my share of United Nations peacekeeping missions. And I would put it to you that while they were a great source of national pride at times, their effectiveness was very limited because in almost every one of them, there was no peace to keep unless the nations had already decided they wanted it. The forces were routinely sent simply to give a cooling off period, and most of the time that didn't work. So peacekeeping missions are a bit of a misnomer. Canadian forces deployed routinely in them. And if you look in my paper, to me, it's not one of the missions that I support. I support combat capable training and capability, and every type of mission that is not focused on that diminishes the ability of our forces to respond when the time is required.
Oh, I agree completely. I mean, peacekeepers are cast out of the country when the nations involved want to go to war.
Correct.
Often peacekeeping is used by third world countries as a source of revenue because they get paid to peacekeep. We've heard terrible stories about some peacekeepers, largely from third world countries as well, engaging in sex trafficking. I guess my only point was, even though it was only for bragging purposes 20 years ago, we don't even have that anymore. And,
Correct.
And the fact that, you know, I think the last mission we were on was when Justin Trudeau's mom came back from a sort of an ecotourism trip to Mali, Africa. Like his mom went there and came back and had a huddle with Justin. And so he sent peacekeepers to Mali, a very dangerous country. Thank God that mission ended with no casualties. But I mean, it's so obvious that Trudeau does not believe the core mission of the military is what you said. It's not about lethality. It's not about projecting force. If you were to ask him, and frankly, I think a lot of the entire political class, I don't have to pick on Justin Trudeau. The NDP would say the same. The Bloc would say the same. And I bet you half the members of the Conservative Party who haven't thought about it clearly would say the same. I bet you 80% of the media, if you ask them the core purpose of the military, they would not say it's to project force, to destroy or neutralize the other side, to protect our territory. They would talk about, like I see an absurd story out of the UK. They're thinking of having, I think it was in the UK, electric-powered military vehicles for carbon reduction reasons. We saw under the Biden-Harris administration an emphasis on transgenderism in the military. These are and I mean, to me, they're ridiculous. Other people might find them worthwhile, but they certainly have nothing to do with lethality. And I don't think the modern liberal state can embrace the idea of we are trying to kill the other side as quickly and efficiently as possible. I don't think they're even comfortable with the idea of a military. What do you think about that?
Well, I start the paper with an ancient quote from ancient Greece. It's anonymous, but every country has an army, theirs or somebody else's. And the intent of that quote was, if you don't defend yourself, someone will come in and take you, and then you'll have their army with their foot on your neck. Now, my entire point in the paper is to try and refocus that combat capability is the core essence of any military. And if you're not training to use it, you are using it. But behind it all, and I think President-elect Trump said it very clearly in his first tenure, that the threat of a fully combat-capable force helps with diplomacy. And that's part of the intent. If you have in Canada a force that can be deployed and that people know is credible and it can cover each of our partnership agreements, all of our alliance agreements, it can defend the sovereignty of Canada and assist in the sovereignty of North America, and the world sees it as best in class, even though it may not be the largest, the mere threat of its use helps in all of our foreign affairs and diplomatic missions because we are a credible nation. We are exactly the opposite now. People look at Canada, our alliances laugh at us, don't invite us to meetings, intentionally ignore our input. Our foreign affairs people have great difficulty getting any credibility in the world because they look at us and they know we're not a serious country and we don't take our national security and part of that national defense seriously at all. In fact, we have intentionally destroyed them.